Hey there everybody, and welcome back. For those of you that are interested in creating your own mobile application for free without coding, stay tuned. Believe it or not, this is actually what we're going to be covering in this video. And again, I can't stress this is actually free, and I'm going to show some resources to prove it. Now, before we get started, this is an update to a previous video that I made. It was pretty popular, so just kind of wanted to do a bit of a refresh as there have been some new services added to this Appgyver platform. Now, before we get started, if you like what you see in here, please don't forget to like and subscribe and check back into the channel for new content. Now, let's go ahead and get started. So what we're going to be using is a platform called Appgyver, and they have a ton of free resources. Before we jump into this, because I don't want to cover too much in this video, I have this playlist on my channel here. So it's how to make a social/sharing app for free without coding. This is a 3 to 4 hour video series where I walk through how to create a sign-in page, link to a Firebase database, all of it again completely free. And I actually go through publishing to Google Play. But for those of you that just want a streamlined video on how basically how the builder works and how the functionality works, I'm going to run through that in this video too. So, getting started, you will head over to appgyver.com. You'll see I have the URL pulled up here. You'll click login or sign up. And when you create your account, again, it's free. They will not ask for a credit card. For those of you that don't believe me on the pricing, you can click on their pricing page. You'll see for indie developers and organizations with less than 10 million in funding or revenue, Composer Pro is free for life. And you can scroll through this to view any additional details. But we're going to go ahead and jump in. So I have 2 applications I've created. We're just going to create a new one from scratch. So when we click on this option, we have to choose the project name. So we'll put for YouTube people. And then we'll choose a theme. We'll go with the default theme. And then it'll take a second to save the new application, and it'll drop you in basically like your main dashboard. Now, the cool thing about this application builder, it's similar to a lot of other no-code and low-code platforms. So basically, what you have over here is the left-hand side with all of your app elements or components, your application here in the middle, and then your settings. So let's break down this view for Composer really quick. Up here in the top left, you'll see your application or project name. If you click on this empty page, you have all of the pages for your application here. Along the top, you have a couple of options that are very important. First being launch. This is actually how you're going to open up build services to generate your APK file to publish your application to Google Play or to the Apple App Store. You have your theme right here. And you'll see you have a ton of different options that you can click on to show additional details. This provides more functionality than most codeless app builders I've ever seen. So you can edit pretty much everything in this application, which is really cool to see. Then you have your navigation menu. So as you're adding new pages, you can choose, do you want a little nav bar on the bottom? And it'll have whatever pages you specify, essentially. Your data tab, which is the more complicated features when it comes to setting up your database. And the backend, which would be Firebase or wherever you choose. Authentication is going to be setting up a user sign-in page. And then community is basically there are different forums, which I highly recommend getting involved in. So let's go ahead and we'll deselect empty page. Now you have, again, your components or your options on the left. This is where you're dropping them into this interface. And then these are the settings for each of the components. You have your page layout down here. And one thing that I really, really like is down here, if you click on this, you have all of your features and flows. All of this we'll go over shortly. And then lastly, at the very bottom, this is basically like your educational series. So you start out in this intro. You will watch these show me how videos. You'll do whatever it says in the video and you get a little check mark. Once you've completed it, you'll move on to the next section, follow through, and continue on until you've essentially mastered everything that's here. So it'll check it off once you've actually done it within Composer. So it's really cool how interactive it is. Now let's go ahead and just create kind of like a basic application. So up here we have a component. It is essentially just your title. So if you want to create or add features, this is what's given by default. I'm just going to select it and choose the X to remove it to start with a blank slate. So I've removed it and I've clicked save, which means that the application is now saved. As you see, we have a dialog. So let's build something. So we'll start off with a title. I know it sounds weird, we just removed it, but I wanted to show you what that looks like. And we'll put, "This is my app." So that's been set up. Now we may want to change the style. So we can go over to Style. Again, this is the settings for this. So we're going to go over to Typography, and you'll see we have a couple of different options. So right here we'll click Center. And you'll see "This is my app" is now centered. So what we can do now, let's just say, okay, this looks good. Maybe we want to add a little summary just to tell people what this actually looks like, or really any details here. So we'll put in some details. This is the app I made with you all. If you want, you can change the typography here, so you can change the text alignment, the formatting. So let's just say we want to change the font to something a little different. So let's go with this font, and maybe you want to make it a little bigger. So we'll make it 18. Now maybe you want to have an image, so you can drop an image in here, and you have a couple of options. So you can go to Dimensions and Position and change some details here, but basically for the image you would go over to Properties, and here's where you're going to choose the source. So you can choose a static image and basically type in the URL like they've done here. Or you can choose an image from a data variable, which is basically a URL stored elsewhere. That way you can make changes outside of the app. That's covered in the series I mentioned earlier. You could choose a formula, which, as you can see, basically just has quotes with the link to a random image. So you could go to unsplash.com or similar websites, paste in a URL right here, and then you'll have that image. Or you can choose this option and upload from your device. Now, the tricky part about this is this basically builds that image into the app. The more images you add, the bigger your app is. That's why it's recommended you keep some images stored elsewhere, maybe on a free Firebase account or something like that. So if we don't need this, we can remove this element. So let's say we want to add a couple of different features and maybe a button that takes us to a different page. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to Card, and then we'll drop in, let's just say, a button right here. So this button, we could call it Page 2. And this card, we'll just say, let's see, Information. And then we'll just type in here some information on the app. So you can make this card clickable if you would like, but the idea is the card is similar to basically having this title and paragraph, but it has the little box surrounding it. So as you can see over here, you have a ton of different components. So maybe you want to add lists and you want to have a little image. So you could drag this over, and essentially you'll have your title, your details. So you see over here, title, description text, and maybe you want to change the image. So as you see, or as you can see, there's a ton of different components you could add. You can add list items, which looks similar to what we just added, except this basically allows users to see, okay, if I click here, it's going to take me somewhere else. You have a search bar you could throw in up at the top if you wanted to configure this. Obviously, this application looks terrible right now because I haven't added in any details. It's just to give you a general idea of some of the functionality. Now, here's the cool part. You are not limited to these components here. You can click on Component Market, and then you'll see all of these other components that are in this component market, and you basically just scroll through. When you find something that you think looks good, you could click it and click Install, and then you would simply drag and drop this over, and you've now added a completely different component. And then over here, you'll tell this, okay, this is a web view. So we'll put www.google.com. We don't have any HTML content. There's no blocked URLs. So we'll just keep that as it is. And we're going to click Save and save this terrible looking application. Now, because this looks like it's kind of conflicting with this, I'm going to delete that component just because there was some overlap. Now, we've saved page 1. Now, again, if you want to create the sign up page, you would go to auth and then enable authentication. That's covered in my YouTube series that I mentioned earlier, and I have some resources provided that take you to a Udemy page if you want to go to someone else who actually covers basically the security piece in a little bit more detail, since I only covered basic login functionality. But that did not include like authentication or anything like that. So as it is, this application doesn't require a login when a user logs in. This is the first and only page they see. So let's go ahead and add a new page. So we can go up here to empty page, click add new page. We'll name this one page 2. Click OK. And you'll see by default you have the exact same layout as the first page did. So we'll type in this is page 2. And then we can go to style, typography, and we will center this. And then here we will put welcome. And this, just because it's a smaller bit of text, we will center this as well. Now on this page, maybe you want to add in something that looks a little different. So maybe we want to add in a row like this, and you'll see this gives us 2 containers. So containers are kind of a cool concept. What a container does, if you just have a sample container, is it allows you to put a bunch of different components locked within one container item. So the idea is this button and this label section are, if you look in this tree, they are actually in this container. So if you ever get into repeating objects, which I cover in that YouTube series or anything like that, it just basically gives you a way to say, okay, this is separate from this row, which has these 2 cells. So what we'll do is we're just going to go ahead and remove the container, which removes the components within it. And we're going to go over to these 2 cells here. Now maybe we want to add 3 cells. So we click on plus, and you can actually choose the cell width to change how big each of these are. And then maybe you decide, okay, the cell on the far right, I want it to have a button. Maybe the cell on the far left, I want it to have an image. And then maybe you want the cell in the middle to have some text. So you go to properties up here. In content, we will just put here is some text. And then the button is here, and then you'll have your image right here. Now, you can adjust the image settings so that this all looks like it's the same size, but bearing in mind this is kind of like a stock image that's been added. So you can adjust all the image dimensions, positions, etc. here. But for now, we'll leave this as is. So we'll click Save. And now we're going to cover some functionality, because up until now, all we've done is add some components. But if you click on this button, nothing's going to happen. We don't have any images here, and basically the text is just static text. So let's go back to page 1 and set up a basic flow. So if we scroll down here and we click on page 2, you'll see we have this button here. This is the logic for this button. Basically what this says is, you'll see we have a default event right here, which is component tab. So this is a button. When a user clicks it, what happens? Whatever happens would go in this space right here. So you'll see over here we have some flow functions. The easiest way to understand how this works, we'll minimize this real quick. These are basically the physical components a user sees. These are the actions that happen in the background when a user interacts with that component. So what we can do here is basic flow function. We'll just open a page. Now what you do is you tell the builder, okay, when the component is tapped, this happens. All you do is draw this line. You'll click on the node here, the little circle or half circle, drag it to this one, and they'll get connected. You'll click on open page, and we just have to tell the builder what page to open. So we click on the page option over here in the settings, and we'll click page 2 and click save. And we'll click save here. So now when you select page 2, it takes you to page 2. Now one thing I want to note here is I highly recommend making sure that you're naming everything. So for example, this right here is going to be your little like sample component. If you scroll down, there's advanced properties, if I'm not mistaken, on almost everything. So you'll see here there's a component display name. This doesn't impact the actual component itself, but it does allow you to change the name so that as you're editing, if you add in a ton of different options and features, you don't get lost with which one is which. So you should name all of your components and also name your pages. To name your page, you can just click Page Layout, and your settings load up here. And in your page name, we'll just put Page 1. And when you click Save, it saves all the changes that we just saved or made. So this, again, very terrible application. Obviously, you would want to create some information here. If you want to learn more in depth about how to connect with the database, check out that YouTube series. But I just want to walk you through testing this real quick. So if you click on Launch, we're going to click Open Build Services. This is going to take us to Build Services where we can actually build the application. So when you click on Configure, you're actually going to generate a key store file. I covered how to do this in my YouTube series. And then you're going to basically adjust the bundle settings, image assets, permissions, etc. So uploading your icon, your splash screen, and then you'll actually go to the build services and you'll be able to build from right within here. So it actually lets you generate an APK file. Again, in my YouTube series, in about 4 hours, I basically walk you through how to create a basic app and then upload it to Google Play. So it's a pretty streamlined process. Now, if you want to test it before you've actually built anything, or before you're actually done with everything, you have two choices. You can download the Appgyver application from Google Play, or I believe it's also in the Apple App Store. You log in, and it actually is just a preview. So you essentially select the application you're building, and it gives you the mobile preview as if you were running the application on your phone. The other choice is clicking on Launch and Preview, and you'll click Open App Preview. Now, from this page, you'll see this is basically what it's going to look like from the mobile application as well. You have to choose what you actually want to view. So you'll see we have this as a full page web preview. Now here's a little shortcut. If you're on a computer, it may look a little scary, but if you right click and click Inspect on the page, you'll notice we have something called like the Google Developer Tools. So you can click up here and it has different previews. So when you select, it looks like a phone and a tablet. You can choose the device type, and you can do this on any web page. This is not limited to Appgyver. Ignore all the code over here. You don't need to see or interact with any of this. What this essentially lets you do is view this web page as a mobile device. So I want to view this as an iPhone X. So you'll see we have everything on the page here. So I want to click on page 2, and you'll see it took us to page 2. And if I click empty page, it brings us back to page 1. So you'll see we had that really basic flow function, which took us to page 2, your button here, which doesn't do anything, your text right here. So this is basically the application in real time. If we go back and we go to build services and actually build this app, it'll give us an APK file we can upload essentially straight to Google Play and run the application live once it's approved. Now, again, this walks through the basics of this. If you have any questions, again, like running the navigation, you can disable navigation bars and menu options here. Again, you can make as many changes as you want. This may seem like there wasn't a ton of detail, but when you think about changing it, you have the ability to add static text, images, basically switch between pages. And again, with this being completely free, this is enough information to get you started running a basic application. Now, if you want to learn more about Appgyver and how to create a social or sharing app, I have a way to create the very basics on my YouTube channel. I will also be putting that link in the description so you can run through, see everything in more detail. And as always, if you have any questions, drop them in the comment box below. I'm happy to help in any way I can. Also, don't forget to take a look at the Appgyver community. They have tons of great resources. If you want to learn more about how to actually create or run different applications, you'd be surprised how much functionality you can get out of the things that we've just covered today. So again, check out the link in the description. I'll put the first video in the series and you can follow through that playlist to create a different application. And if you have any questions, drop them in the comment box below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video.